Wow, what a full shop. I guess there's more to the League of Women Voters in the Bay Area than there is just Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville, which I'm quite familiar with. It's a pleasure to be here. Small world department. During the Clinton administration, Dan Riker served as Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and I had the title of Senior Advisor for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which means that I reported directly to Dan Riker, and it was a pleasure working with him. I think I'm going to give us a little bit of a pat on the back and some idea of how much progress we've made in energy efficiency since the fall of the year 1973, when the Arabs, when OPEC officially raised prices and set up an oil embargo. And that was really the beginnings of modern U.S. efficiency programs, and in fact even modern environmental programs. The Arabs didn't really care about it, but were a great stimulus to our thinking in the United States. So, this is a plot from 1949 to 1973. From 1973 to 1985 was the high prices of OPEC, and then on to 2007. The vertical axis is energy which it took to produce $1 of gross domestic product in terms of heathen units called British thermal units, BTUs, in the year $2,000. And what I want you to notice is the blue line, which is actual performance, going down, which means higher efficiency, less energy per dollar. And the red line, which I call business as usual, which is simply an eyeball fit through the pre-1973 data and into the future. And what you'll notice is that the future departs pretty fast from business as usual when prices were high and gasoline and fuel were short. This is the wonderful days in which we went from 14 miles per gallon in 1975. This is about the time it took for energy efficiency to take hold. 14 miles per gallon to 28 miles per gallon in 1985. This is back to business as usual. This is what I call the Reagan-Thatcher years. So what we worry, we've solved the energy problem. And then this is the impact, I think, mainly of computers. The efficiency of doing business really went up. I'm going to have to keep jiggling this mouse to keep it on. And we come down more steeply again. Now, that says that we've really responded in a fairly significant way. If we had stayed with business as usual, we would have been up here, and in today's energy use, that's $2.1 trillion a year, or 15% of gross domestic product. In fact, we're not. We're down here at the blue at $1.2 trillion a year. We're discussing big business and we're discussing big savings. Just to give you some idea, the difference between $1.2 trillion and $2.1 trillion, this was for 2007. I'm not looking at 2008, 9, and 10 on the assumptions that they're transient, which will hopefully decay and will take more stable numbers. The difference is nearly $1 trillion a year. Now, I don't know if you can remember back in the days when the deficit was only $1 trillion a year, but that was 2007. So if we had kept the services the same and had kept taxes the same as they were in 2007, our deficit would have been double what it actually is. Put a little more populistically, $1 trillion is enough to support the Department of Defense and fighting 1.5 wars perpetually. Not suggesting that should be done, but I'm suggesting it's a lot of money. So, like it or not, I'm supporting Dan Riker's point that we're saving about $1 trillion a year now on energy efficiency. If we keep it up, it'll grow. We are delaying climate change, and we're saving enough money to invest a great deal of it back into renewables and the sustainable use of energy. That's for the United States as a whole. Let's see how it works for California. Now, this is only since 1960, but I've added California and I've cheated. I'm going to show you this in a better curve now in a moment, but I wanted to show you this is completely up to date. It's from the Energy Information Agency. And notice it's no longer energy use per dollar GNP, but I've changed it to kilowatt hours for electricity, and it's per person, which somehow or other is the way I've tracked this historically. Why kilowatt hours and not total energy? Well, remember that 30% of our energy use is automobiles. Automobiles, in California, we don't control our own destiny. They're nationally preempted. The Pavley bill did get to the Supreme Court, and automobile efficiencies will go up from 27.5 miles per gallon to 33 by, in fact, about 2018. But up till now, automobiles have been outside of our power, whereas electricity and gas policy, we control our own destiny. So I switched to electricity only, and the gas story is about the same, but less money, and so I'm doing just electricity. Notice again that both curves are temporarily down because of the recession, but as I say, I'm keeping my fingers crossed and assuming that's a transient. Here is the same data with the savings emphasized by putting a blue band. Here is 1960 and 1973, and it was growing exponentially 6% a year, which means doubling every 12 or 13 years. Obviously that didn't happen. The United States kept growing, but much more slowly. California, you can see an actual dip in California at the time of the embargo. That's because California was mainly on oil for generating electricity, so there was an actual shortage of oil and gas lines, as some of you will remember, gasoline lines. But then energy policy kicked in, and refrigerators standards appeared, and building standards appeared, and pilot lights for stoves disappeared. And we've kept electricity use per person despite an enormous trend towards electrification with new computers and new gadgets and new stuff. So we stayed flat. The United States had access to the same amount of information, not the same politics, not the same energy commission, and by now has doubled. Now, I don't want to suggest that all of this is policy. About a third of it is just plain good weather. Particularly, you may remember that back before 1995 or whatever, most of the population lived along the coast. The coast is very mild. You can greatly improve building standards, and we did. But as a result of that, you can get to a situation where a new house or a new building takes virtually no energy in California. That's not true in Boston today, or Washington, D.C. today, where there's a lot of snow on the ground, or even Sacramento today, where there's going to be a lot of heat in the summertime. But Sacramento is still small. So a third of it is just the Camelot effect. A third of it is price. We don't have a lot of coal, and we've been strong on renewables for a long time, and electricity costs 12 cents a kilowatt hour on the average in this state, whereas in the rest of the United States, where there's a lot of coal, the average United States cost is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour, so electricity is 20% more expensive. And we pay some sort of economic price for having more expensive electricity. Lots of new factories, startups, start up in the first factory is in Silicon Valley, and then they realize that they can migrate to Portland and get really dirt cheap power from Bonneville Power. In Bonneville Power Authority, and off they go. And that's part of long-term elasticity of electricity. But about a third of it is building standards and appliance standards, which are really the cheapest way known to man to improve efficiency. And I propose to show you a few of those. So the remark I want to circle here is that our electricity is more expensive, but we use so much less of it that our bills are cheaper. And this says that when I made this plot in 2007, we were saving about $165 per person per year in electric bills, as compared with the United States on the average. If you take a family of 3 to be a household or a typical utility customer, that's about $500 a year that we're ahead. So again, using your brains and the right policies do help. I want to show you a plot which is needs updating. It is updated regularly, but the plot got broken into more bands and wasn't as easy to read. But this is a plot of the savings in electricity, starting with business as usual in 1975 and going to, I'm sorry, only 2003, and the implication of standards. The total savings in electricity from standards and utility energy efficiency programs was around 15% avoided electricity in 2003. About 20% now. I don't know whether you folks know it or even feel particularly good about it, but your electric bills are about 3% higher than they would otherwise be. And that produces $1 billion a year, and that gets administered by the utilities into energy efficiency programs, rebates for refrigerators, rebates for compact fluorescent lamps, what are called golden carrot programs, in which they put up enough money for a new assembly line for any manufacturer who will produce a much better refrigerator or a much better rooftop air conditioning unit and so on. And that's worked extremely well, and that's why the savings are up to about 20% a year. The savings can be broken up into three bands. The first one is appliance standards, and I'll talk about a few of those in my remaining 5 minutes. The second are building standards, and the third is these investor-owned utility $1 billion a year, which I just mentioned. The $1 billion a year program has about 3 to 1. That is, the $1 billion a year results in annual savings of about $3 billion a year. So it's a very good investment. But it's only 3 to 1. The building standards and the appliance standards cost almost nothing to administer. There's a small group at the Energy Commission which consists of 10 or 15 people who update the standards every 3 years. And there's a fairly large research group at each of the utilities who make suggestions for updating the standards. But the payback to society is more like 100 to 1 than 3 to 1, and certainly has contributed enormously to California's reputation. Let's look at some of the progress that's been made since 1972 till, again, about today. The regular is the gas furnace, which is only 30% better than it used to be, but 30%, every 30% helps. Central air conditioning, I'll get to in a minute, and refrigerators, I'll get to in a minute. One thing you may be interested in as Californians is the difference between the open arrows, which are California standards, and the solid arrows, which are where the feds took over the appliance standards after Mr. Reagan left office. This is refrigerators, and it's typical. Some of you have probably seen parts of this picture before. It's my favorite slide, but it has a new green line on it, which I think is interesting, so I'll talk about it for a couple of minutes. The time scale was 1947 to the embargo. You can see that something happened at the embargo, 1973, and then on to 2002, and the refrigerator efficiency has just been doubled again, so it's now down to 1/8 as much power as it used to use in 1973. Just sort of historically, let's get rid of the pink curve. That's the volume in cubic feet, the cold volume. Hard to remember it, but the scale is over here, and it's in cubic feet, and it seems to read about 8 cubic feet in 1949. By 1973, it had zoomed up to 15 cubic feet. And then it sort of levels off because there's a problem with how big a refrigerator you can get through the kitchen door. Somehow or other, Sub-Zero and some other brands have managed to get 2 units separable and have broken the barrier, the sound barrier. But the data here is not corrected for that. This is just the average price of new refrigerators. The average electricity use of new refrigerators and the average price in the green line. Instead of going off in this direction through the roof, there's this remarkable right-hand turn. And this was a result of the first California standards being announced, although they didn't take hold until 1977, and the yellow energy guides, which the federal government gets credit for acting for very promptly. This corresponds to nearly 2,000 kilowatt hours per year, which at today's residential prices would be $300 a year. It's equivalent to a 200-watt light bulb burning all the time, 24/7. By the end of this plot, it's down to 1/4, and as I say, it's coming down again another factor 2. So the refrigerator you buy starting a few years from now will be equivalent not to a 200-watt light bulb, but to a 20-watt light bulb, burning all the time, or 25 watts to be exact. Now the good news is that we've been doing it all wrong. We could have done better. This green line here is the retail price starting in 1972, but in current dollars, and well in $2,000, I think. And what you'll notice is that the price comes down almost as fast as the energy use comes down. Now, the standards were based on a micro-engineering economic analysis in which we required better insulation in the walls, more copper in the heat exchangers, more efficient motors, and so on. And they were all supposed to cost more, and they were paid for by the savings over the 16-year lifetime of the refrigerator. So everybody expected the price to go up a little bit. What actually happens is the manufacturers all say, oh golly, gotta redo the darned assembly lines. And it's been 10 years since they updated their assembly lines. They're cash cows. Why? It's working, keep it working. And so when they update them, they put in all the new tricks. They put in robots and numerical control and better drying of paint and so forth and so on. And lo and behold, the price comes down. So there's a modern tendency in doing standards to emphasize learning curves or learning by doing. And this turns out to be a discovery that's worldwide. There's a paper out of the International Energy Agency in Paris showing that if you look at 6 different appliances, washers, dryers, air conditioners, and so on, in about 10 markets, Japan, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, China, and the United States, there's not a single case where the price went up. Which seems to show that the people who say that having modern factories is a good idea. So Gail says, I've got a minute, I'm going to fool her by quitting right now, and thank you very much.